Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Mike. This is my whiteboard, and today we're going to be looking at defined risk spreads and 3 benefits of making them wider. So we might be dabbling in options, creating defined risk spreads. Maybe we're successful and our account is growing. What can we do to scale? Well, one way that we found to be a successful way to scale is not by doubling into those accounts. So instead of selling one 1-point wide spread, I would sell 2 1-point wide spread. One thing we found to be a little bit better is actually making that spread wider. So we're going to look through 3 benefits of doing so, and it's going to give you a little bit of insight into how these options are working at the core. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about the top 3 things that we're going to be benefiting from when we widen our spreads. And the first one we're going to get into is a larger credit. The wider we make our spread, if we keep the short option at the same strike and we widen our spread further out, we're going to be paying less for that long option to define our risk. We are taking on a little bit more risk, but we're collecting a larger credit at the end of the day because the short option is really what we're looking for when we're looking at profitability. Secondly, in doing so, we're going to be increasing our probability of profit. So with a wider spread and a wider credit, we're going to get a wider break-even price, and we're going to look at what we can take away from that wider break-even and how it relates to the probability of profit. And lastly, we're going to look at naked option behavior. So the wider and wider we go, especially in an IRA account, there are some ways that we can replicate naked option strategies by purchasing far out of the money wings. Although it is a technically defined risk, the lower credit there is in that long option, the more and more it's going to behave like a naked option. So let's get right into it with the first slide of larger credit. So we've got a scenario here where we've got the stock price at 80 and we're looking to sell a defined risk put spread. So if we're selling a put spread, we're selling a put that's just close to that stock price there. So in this case, we're selling the 78 put, and we're buying a further out of the money put, which is the 76 put. So in doing so, since we know that the most option premium is going to be right at the money, and it's going to slowly dissipate as we get further and further out of the money, we're going to collect a credit for this trade. If I'm selling something that's worth $350 and I'm buying something that's worth $250 to define my risk, the difference there is going to be my credit. So let's take a look at this first position here. So we've got the stock price at 80. We're looking at selling a 78 put and buying a 76 put just behind that. So what we have right here is a 2-point wide spread. So we're collecting $350 for the short put, buying the 76 put for $250. The difference between those values gives us a total credit of $1. So our max profit on this trade is going to be $1 or $100 at expiration. We want the stock price to stay right here. It can go down a little bit, but as long as it doesn't go past this value here, we're going to be able to keep that max credit of $100. Best case scenario is the stock price rises, which is probably going to give us the ability to capture most of that profit much quicker than if it stayed right here throughout the life cycle of the trade. So let's take a look at what happens when we move our strike. So we have our 2-point wide spread up here, but what if we create a 5-point wide spread? Let's see what that would look like. So we would still keep our short put at 78, just out of the money. We'd be collecting $350, but if we move our long strike over to the 73 strike, we're paying $1.50 for that. So instead of paying $2.50, we're paying $1.50, and because we're paying a lower amount, we're going to be collecting a larger credit. So our new max profit, if we did this, would be $200 at expiration. So we've effectively doubled our max profit at expiration if the stock price stays above 78. And we've widened our break even. We're going to talk about how that affects the trade in just a little bit. But right here, we're just looking at a larger credit. So the final example is down here where we're looking at a 10-point wide spread. So we're moving that long option extremely far out of the money, all the way down to 68. So we would be purchasing that for 25 cents, as you can see. So if I'm collecting $3.50 here for the 78 option and I'm paying 25 cents for the 68 option, it is still a defined risk spread, but I'm almost collecting as much as I would if I had just sold that put outright at 78. I'm collecting $3.25, and this spread is going to behave very differently than this spread up here. We're going to get to that on the last slide. But as you can see, the wider our spread is, the more credit I'm going to receive. And that's because the less I am paying for that long option. So The moving factor here is the long option. You can see I'm collecting 350 in each of these scenarios for my short put, but the further out of the money I move that long strike, the less I have to pay for it. So I'm taking on more risk as we go down the line here, but in taking on more risk, I'm collecting a larger credit. So what does this credit do for me? Let's go to the next slide and we'll start talking about that. So we know that when we're looking at collecting more of a credit, we're going to widen our break-even point. So let's take a look at where our break-even would be. So moving our break-even is going to increase our give me a higher probability of profit. And that's because of the fact that if I can break even at a lower point with this particular strategy, my probability of success is going to be much higher. So if my break-even is at 77, I've got my sold put spread here at 78 and 76. If I collected $1 for this spread here, my break-even is going to be 77. At the expiration, I'm going to have to buy back the spread for $1, but since I collected $1 for that, I'm going to break even on that trade. My P&L is going to be 0. So if I've got this spread here, collected $1, and I need to buy it back at 77 for $1, I know that my break even is going to be at 77. So if I'm collecting $1 and my max loss is $1 in this particular 2-point wide spread, my probability of profit is going to be right around 50%. It's going to be more of a coin flip than a high probability trade. So let's see how I can increase that. Well, if we look at that same example here where I'm collecting $2 by moving my long strike down to 73, it's going to move my break even to 76. So now I'm collecting $2 on a 5-point wide spread, which means my max loss is greater. It's going to be $300. So all I'm doing there is taking that 5-point wide spread, as you see here, subtracting the credit that I'm receiving from that, and the remaining balance of that spread is going to be my potential max loss. And that would be realized if the stock price moved from 80 all the way down to 73 or below. But in doing this and collecting a larger credit, I'm moving my break-even point even further. So now my break-even point is at 76. So what does this mean? Now, instead of the stock price going to 77 to break even, the stock can go all the way to 76 and I'll still break even. So what this translates to is a better probability of profit. The more I move my break even in my favor, the higher the probability of profit's going to be. Another cool trick you can do is, if you're familiar with checking out the probabilities of in the money on the Thinkorswim platform, you can basically take these break-even points, look at where the break-even is, and look at the probability of out of the money or in the money is for that specific strike. That's going to give you a rough probability of profit that you would see in the Doe platform being calculated for you. But if you're using the Thinkorswim platform, you could easily do that as well. And last but not least, we're looking at moving our strike even further. So we've got a 10-point wide put spread here. So we're looking at selling the 78, buying the 68, and we're collecting a much larger credit. If we remember, we're collecting a $3.25 credit here. So if I subtract $3.25 from my short put at 78, that gives me a break even of 74.75. So I'm moving my break even further down, and it's going to give me a rough probability of profit of around 68%. I'm collecting about a third of the width, just over a third of the width. I'm collecting $3.25 on a 10-point wide spread. So my probability of profit should be around 68–70%. But as you can see here, the wider I move my spreads, the higher my probability of profit will be. So let's go on to the final slide and we'll talk about the last benefit that I see with naked options. So when we're looking at the spreads here, we're trying to replicate naked option behavior. The more we can replicate naked option behavior, the better it's going to be for us. And the one thing I want to point out is the long option decay. So as you can see, we've got the same strike. We're selling the 78 put in each of these examples, but the further we move down our long put, the less option decay we're going to have on the long option. So let's talk about the volatility factor here. So in this very first spread, if we have the stock price at 80 and it stays there the entire time, we're going to have positive theta decay on this 78 option, and it's going to decay lower and lower and lower until eventually at expiration it will be worth nothing. But since we're long a put at 76, we're going to have negative theta decay on that option. So we're going to see the option decrease in price just like we would on the 78 strike, but since we're long the option, it's going to hurt us. So this spread is going to decay much slower than this spread down here, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the main takeaway is the long option decay with these spreads. The further out we move the long aspect of our spread out of the money, and the lower total long option decay there is, the more it's going to act like a naked option. So let's look at the second example here. So with a 5-point wide spread, if my long option decay is $1.50, yes, it's still going to decay and hurt my position since I'm only, my max profit on this one's only $200, but I've got a lot less long option decay than in this situation up here. So when we're talking about $2.50 or $250 that I could be potentially losing when I compare it to just selling the put outright, it's going to be a lot harder for me to collect decay from just a theta decay standpoint on this spread than it will be for this spread, because there's only $1.50 that needs to decay from here, where there's $2.50 that needs to decay from here. But if we look at the last example here, this is where the money ball is. So for me, this is what's going to behave the most when it comes to replicating a naked option. And that's because we only have 25 cents here to decay. So let's take a 45-day till expiration example. If I'm selling $3.50 here on the 78 strike and 25 cents on that 68 strike, maybe it would only take 10 days or 11 days, 12 days out of that 45 days for this 25 cents to become 5 cents or 6 cents or 7 cents. You really don't know, but once it gets down to that option value, if it's down at 6 or 7 cents, then it's not really going to have an effect on my position. Then we're going to be able to see the decay on this option where $3.50 is going to continue to decay, and that decay is going to translate into profit on our end. So the less long option decay we have when we're looking at spreads, the more it's going to look and feel like a naked option. So when you're looking at this 10-point wide spread, although it will have more risk, it's going to have a higher probability of profit. We're going to be collecting a lot more, which is going to benefit our total profit. And we're going to have less long option decay. So when we're looking at theta decay working for us, or if there's a volatility crush, we're going to realize a lot more profit on this spread than, for example, in this spread, because a volatility crush on the short put would be very beneficial here, but it's also going to crush the value of this option, which is going to hurt that total overall spread. So all in all, the more risk we take, the more the spread's going to look like a naked option and feel like a naked option. So let's get this all together with some takeaways on the last slide. The very first takeaway is that when we're scaling, wider wings is greater than doubling down. We've shown this in many segments where we compared doubling down on a spread. So on that example, if we're looking at a 2-point wide spread, if we want to scale, maybe doubling down would be adding another contract. So instead of selling one 2-point wide spread, we're selling two 2-point wide spreads. Yes, we're going to be collecting more. We're going to be taking on more risk, but it's not going to be enhancing our probability of profit like widening our wings would, as you saw in that example. Also, more credit is more profit. So the more credit we receive, the better we're going to be able to benefit our break-even point, as you see here. And in doing so, it's going to increase our probability of profit. If we can break even at a much lower value, if we're bullish on an underlying in this short put spread example, that's going to give us a much higher probability of profit than if we're collecting less of a credit, because we're going to have a lot less room to be successful or break even on that position. And lastly, the weirdest sentence you'll probably hear today, the wider we go, the more naked we feel. And while that is a crazy sentence, it is so true when we're looking at defined risk spreads. The wider we go and the less we're paying for that long option way out of the money, the more that option is going to feel and act like a naked option. Like we looked at just selling the option for $3.50, if we're buying an option for 25 cents, that 25 cents isn't going to have a huge factor. Even if the put goes all the way down to zero, it's only going to reduce my total probability or my total credit that I'm receiving by 25 cents. So in doing so, I'm reducing my buying power reduction in a lot of cases, especially in an IRA account. And I'm able to replicate that sort of synthetic naked option feel, but also define my risk, which is something that I might be comfortable with. So these are my 3 benefits of wider spreads. Hopefully you've enjoyed them. If you got any feedback or maybe some of your own benefits, shoot them to one of these emails here, or you can tweet me at DoTraderMike. We've got Jim Schultz with Theory to Practice coming up next though, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our video.
If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up or share it with a friend.
Click below to watch more videos, subscribe to our channel, or go to our website.